Hello everyone. Talk is in English. I'm gonna switch it. But yeah, first things first. I'm just gonna ask in the round first who's been at revision this year or maybe last year. Okay, now, all right. Who's seen the invitation Grow Beyond? What we're gonna talk about? Yeah, good. Just so I know a little bit. Maybe as kind of a breakdown, background information. It's kind of just a tradition that when one organizes a demo party, invites demo sceners, held some competitions, there will be a real-time production at another party, usually, which invites the people to the party, maybe show some features, maybe just show some nice little thingies. And over the course of a few months, during the last year, together with some wonderful people, I had the chance to work on this year's revision invitation. And yeah, just thought I'd show you some behind the scenes infos and insights into both the tech and the graphical side of things. So first things, I'm just gonna show you the thingy. So we have all seen it and yeah, know what's coming. All right. So yeah, that was the production we're going to talk about. I want to basically hope that I can manage to speak about a bit the general plan that we had when we started, the concept and concepts that we did, how we built the tech, and what kind of tech we built. Something maybe then again about the planning. Also want to show you on the actual files a few of the workflow stuff and a few of the little tricks here and there that made a few of those scenes possible. And yeah, then I hope I can also take some of your questions. But first, also, hi everyone, getting the introduction slide out of the way. Generally, I do computer graphics stuff, like to dabble in procedural thingies. I've been regular at demo parties before I was legally allowed to drink. And I also do with Echtzeit, the Swiss Demoscene Association, quite a few things, especially the Mountain Bites demo party in Zug. Yeah, next one will be in February. So yeah, that's a bit about me. This wasn't the first invitation that I did. Also wasn't the first revision invitation that we did. And I helped out with some others, but it was the first time that I kind of was involved for a demo production, not an intro, and been there from the start. So yeah, timeline, like the time frame I want to cover now, and that was kind of the outlook when we started, which was pretty much right after last year's revision, and I think it maybe even started at the party. I know there was talking with Shona, and we talked about the lighting in the hall, and somehow we went on to do, I think we never had green effect lights at the party. That was kind of like some of the spark that then, well, maybe we could do a little bit of nature theme, maybe something in the forest, and then things, yeah, took their ways from there. As you can see, like some of the idea was, okay, now it's spring. During summer, we would see if we can assemble a team, finish the concept, start with some tech, but then in autumn, going to winter, that we really could focus on finishing the tech and the content. And because usually my role in doing demos is like a lot of the editing, like you would edit a movie, structuring, doing a lot of the camera work, stuff like that. So I thought, okay, this time I want to have really one big block, especially maybe then starting in November, but really having the whole December just for fine-tuning the editing, and then until the end of the year, having basically a pre-final version of everything, use the whole January to polish it, and then in February was the planned release at last year's Mountain Bites. So there would be some spare time, and this looked great. But first, and this is maybe a bit unusual compared to other demoscene productions, as we first had to like assemble the team, because usually, yeah, you would go on and you just ask one of the established demo groups who are already a team. For this production, because the concept was a bit different, go into, we realized now we would like to ask especially different artists, but also coders around to contribute to it. So first looked around, and as you could have seen with the credits, this was basically then the final assembled team, just also to introduce you a bit to those in the different roles. So yeah, I mean, hi, I mainly did 3D graphics and the directions part. Pro was probably the first person I've talked to besides Shana, because he was responsible for all the main coding and the tool coding. Scrolllock was very interesting because he joined basically, it was his first demo they did, and he basically joined to help out with some 3D assets and he's doing stuff in Blender. That's how he joined. He did all the watercolor paintings of the squirrels in that production. That's kind of then where it goes. So he was very, very central. Sylvia is quite new scener. I think only has released in the last 2 or 3 years. And I just like the stuff she did in shaders and in the 4Ks. Also interesting that she's situated in Hong Kong and pretty much together with her partner kind of is the Hong Kong demo scene. So this was also, I always like to spread it out, so to speak. Cold Storage, fantastic musician, which you probably know a lot of the stuff. He also joined for the soundtrack. Shauna joined in all the pixel graphics you've seen, not in the end, the leaves, things like that. Her work. Darky also joined quite early. He's a fantastic 3D graphician. He did the rendering of the evac and also a lot of those sci-fi looking objects. Last did all the code for the Gaussian splatting renderer, I will get into a bit. And Ixi and Gabby, they supplied the 3D model of the evac that they did a bit earlier. So they basically lent this to us, which helped tremendously also with the timeline. And this was originally done for a little project called Sofa World. And maybe also if you're academically interested in like socializing in online spheres, look up Sofa World, will be interesting. But of course, we also had quite a few other people helping out. Just want to give a shout out also to those. Luisa helped with contacting a few people. Procyon did also a lot of work. Background, there were teammates Kuba and Red, which also helped out or were involved in the planning. Sule, who then got on and did the t-shirt designs and all that great stuff for Revision. He was a great big part in the beginning. And I hope I didn't forget anything. But yeah, it was, of course, quite an involved team. There were people from Switzerland, Germany, Finland, again, Hong Kong, the Netherlands, who worked together. And this was mainly also because, again, the kind of concept that we started with. There was one of the very, very first things I did. That's a classic mood board, collecting some screen grabs from different things, collect them. Just we want something that feels a bit like this, and the idea was pretty much situated in like intros for TV shows, some obvious movies that we know of, but it was the idea of kind of having this feel of a very stylistic intro to a TV show with a lot of graphical artistic elements, probably in 3D space, but probably wasn't planned to have like full 3D scenes and things like that. And we had some wishes, you know, what we started with. Want to showcase a lot of handcrafted artwork. That was also then because why we reached out to different people to get different styles and so on together. Also because a bit also for a kind of showcase, also for that part of the demo scene. I usually like to say it's not really that those people are artists doing art. It's more that it's an artisan craft, a digital craft, and kind of showcasing also a lot of thing and combining those different looks, different media, and so on. I think this one came up quite a bit, just also the idea, something that feels kind of green and foresty and so on, which probably then started then also having woodland critters in there. We wanted to involve some like new tech, or besides the artistic merit, also having some interesting code in there. Was also one of the reasons why I reached out to Chrome, because a few months earlier, at the demo party, he showed me some Gaussian splat things, and we talked about that this could be really nice for some demo effects and so on. Then I reached out and basically went like, hey, would you like to have no free time for the next 6 to 8 months, but being able to maybe play around with some Gaussian splat stuff? And of course, we also had the wish to have no crunch, which, especially like for the people who were there from the start and knew they would be needed until the end, you get into it with, well, if stuff happens, it will be on us to just power through it. But like with consuming certain substances and stuff like that, it's fine if people make choice for themselves and for health, but I do not want anyone feeling pressured to feeling socially obligated to go beyond something that's healthy for them. So it was quite important for me also for the timeline that we're not getting into a situation where people are just then pushed and burning out afterwards. Here's also some things that were done quite early. That's just, I kind of like to do this stuff, like color schemes, like abstract timelines, having those sheets like for each act. We always following in Act 1, 2, and 3, having classical structure. More on that maybe later. But especially at that point, we didn't have any technology to build this or to run it. So that was kind of first step, parallel to the concept work. Pro was starting to start on tech, and these were kind of our starting points. What we thought, then what we would need for kind of this combined media look they want to go. Yeah, we will need to load some 3D models and PNGs, probably in some kind of layered way. Those we want to blend modes and with different masks. We need some post-processing on there, some effect works, also on the layers. That stuff needs to be animatable, of course. There will also be some things like cameras and stuff, but we looked at, well, maybe we can just use Blender for this. And yeah, I remember when we started out, it was really okay, but yeah, let's not go directly and make a whole new tool and editor. Also from some past experience of just like big one-off projects which aren't very nice. And we looked just, that we can do as much in some different tools, looked around like tooling from other demo sceners, what could be nice, which obviously resulted then in us building a complete new editor from scratch. How things go. Just turned out that, probably still makes sense. So just for those interested in kind of the background, that's the dependencies of the tool that then went out for those who just want to take the reference. If you dabble in like computer graphics, desktop tooling, probably some things will be familiar with it. So it's a pretty standard OpenGL stack. ImGUI does all the GUI stuff, and then there are some libraries for loading assets. And Fmod, if you're not familiar, that is doing the audio part, the other playing back MP3s and OGGs, things like that. Wrong button. So, of course, now it's live demo time. Trying to show you this, so bear with me. What we came up with then in the end was this little tool. Okay, that works. Nice. So that's the state of the tool at the end of the production. Just because was easiest this way. For me, I'm just gonna show you a little bit of the way it works. So we have a timeline at the bottom. We have our rendered image in the middle, and I can now add another clip. For example, a image clip here in timeline. I can also zoom. I can put it on different layers, and let's load here one image, which gets rendered. And a lot of the stuff happens in the so-called FX stack, which allows you to add different effects, so to speak. So let's browse, for example, put on some color correction, add some contrast, add some gain, tint it in some way, like that kind of stuff. And those effects, they are all just GLSL fragment shaders. So, for example, I can show you. Go into effects and into blur. Yeah, sorry. So that's the blur effect that we just seen. It's not wild. Also, if you ever used like a shader toy, that's probably familiar. So it kind of uses the uses the basics uniform, this naming that also Shader Toy uses, which also means that the tool is like fully compatible with Shader Toy. So you can add a shader as a layer and basically just copy paste the Shader Toy shader in there and it will render. The UI, like here we have for the blur, we have also these buttons to like only blur the red channel, for example, and also width and so on. These are also just uniforms. So you write them in a shader, you prefix it with PM for parameter, of course, and add kind of like some additional metadata in the comments, like your default value, the range, and so on. And tool will parse this, build the UI from it. So a lot is centered then just around GLSL pixel shader, and that makes it quite flexible to use. It's also, if anyone ever built something like this, first thing, hot reload on the shader makes everything better, because then you can basically, while you're building stuff, hack away on, for example, the effects and things like that. And just for the basic principles, again, how it works, let's add another image here. And to get some action in there, we have, of course, our transforms. And if we say, okay, we start out like this, we can set a keyframe, move forward a bit. And because it has auto keyframe, now it's animating. And let me just shortly mute it. We can also switch then the view, for example, to the keyframe view. This changes. We can change the interpolation. If we want something that starts out fast and then gets slower, and to kind of show what's then pretty powerful if you're working like this, and maybe someone maybe is a bit reminded about After Effects and video editing tools, and yeah, that was pretty big inspiration. So of course we also have a adjuster clip, which is like an adjustment layer in other tools, which let me get some good effect out there, which would just like take everything that's rendered below the clip, and then you can apply effects on it. And because it is a talk about demoscene stuff, we of course gonna radial blur it, and then can also do some animation on there. And yeah, then we have little scenery thing like this. That's was also kind of tool where I put most of those things together. All the 3D content was then just also another clip, which will take a 3D scene file as an input and renders this, and all the other things, transitions and so on, was all done in here. To show you a little bit about the progress then, because again, I thought this is a state at the end of the project. I would say the most of the concept of the tooling framework, the UI, that was probably done like 6 or 8 weeks after Pro started, so that was quite impressive. But of course, it still took quite a bit to then get at the end. And maybe just this was like one of the earliest things that I did with it, and that's just PNGs, images. It's just like little testing thingy, but still with only some simple shaders and images, one can already do quite a few things. This was also an early test. They were just the trees were simply rendered from Blender as PNGs, and then put in here with some transformations. Then we got some object rendering, which was still errors, and yeah, we just kind of played around with different stuff. Of course, then again, it got into the blending kind of things, and that's just, yeah, still the ideas with the masks. Of course, you can also then write pixel shaders, which can be used as masks for different layers, which was kind of this thing. Those are 2 images blended and one is masked. And then it started to kind of had first things and elements that we also then saw in the actual productions. These were just some sketches then that Scrolllock did. With this was still a very, very simple, just OBJ renderer. And in the meantime, I did an Acre model that we then used quite a lot. Again, you can kind of see some of the just transformations that the content did, and I would say something like this was pretty near to the original concept that we did, which was very, very stylized. Kind of just used the 3D models more like little elements here and there. It all has a very like stage kind of feel to it. No real like camera movement and things like that. And then we also started again. Bama did those great. Scrolllock did those great aquarels, and we also started, of course, in a very early stage with those kind of transition effects. And you see quite a lot of different ideas that were around at different times. And yeah, some of them which then get lost. And then we had like the first like full 3D scenes. They looked a bit different at that time. And also, if you especially then with full 3D rendering and stuff, you also have then to deal with things like this. It doesn't always look correct at the first try, and I think this especially, it was like combined 3 or 4 bugs that just had to worked on sequential, but yeah, that's just then the kind of stuff you deal with. if you build pretty much everything from the ground up. And then at some place was also then kind of like, now it's getting kind of to look like the final product that we seen. That was kind of the capture of the first time we had something like a first act. I'm just gonna skip a little bit through here, but that's pretty much already the content of the first act. But the clip is still like 2 minutes long, so it's a lot longer than in the final product. But we already see most of those scenes. Some of them looked a bit different or still had some bugs, and transitions were different and had some other ideas. But I also wanted to show, now this was, as I said, first time we had like a cut of the first act. Just to show you, that was recorded on January 4th, 2025. Does not really match our original timeline, you know. So yeah, what about others? So now it's a good time to talk about the actual reality next to the planning, because yeah, pretty much none of this original timeline survived during actually working on it. So what were the things that changed, or things that didn't work out? Probably one of the biggest ones was I was very much in this mind space of very minimal 3D stuff, focus on a lot of handcrafted 2D artwork, use 3D just to combine it. There were a long time where I always said to like, no, we don't need like a shading model or things like that. It will all be flat, yada. And I pushed quite hard to utilize USD in this Pixar's Universal Scene Description format as an interchange format for 3D data. The alternative was GLTF. And was mostly because, again, it's all low poly, and but we need good camera controls, for example. And I had some not so good experiences with exchanging camera data in GLTF. So I pushed for USD. And it simply turned out that USD is way too big in terms of a specification and in terms of the libraries, and that the kind of the small, easy to use libraries then turned out to not support the features that we needed, and we lost quite a lot of time trying to get USD to work, and we then actually switched back to GLTF. But this is quite a lot of things. Then also in the end, way less hand-painted elements that we thought, but we also at first didn't think that we would like have those watercolor paintings. That was really basically Scrolllock, and sometimes was like, yeah, you know, I could do some storyboarding a little bit. Yeah, I would like to do this. Again, it was mostly for like the model of the C64 and the Grays, and basically all the like instrument and PC models were from him. And then was like, yeah, I did some storyboarding stuff, and it were those really great paintings, which was pretty much at the same time that we also realized, well, life happens, and not everything turns out as one has planned. But with that, we basically had, somewhere in around autumn, had kind of a new concept to work with. But it also meant, because just of this structure of the content, less of compositing, because it was also a bit less styles, but I was able to also, or we were able to put out a lot more detailed 3D content than we planned with. So we did this. And yeah, we basically then had a full stack of content then only in January, which also meant that there were only a few weeks left for all the editing, all the camera stuff. And this was also where we actually knew who will do the soundtrack. And I think also like first version of the soundtrack to then synchronize to was some mid-January, something around this. Of course, big shout out to Cold Storage, who on short notice took this up and also was fantastic to work with in general. And yeah, but in general, life happens. Some decisions were, in hindsight, not well informed, but you work with what you have. And of course, at one point, maybe that's something which saved a few things on there. Yeah, we like the full kind of production thing, which we now do, like the final sequences, started way later than intended. But we used like the tool chain that we planned, and in general the tools that we used. We already put like quite a bit of time in this, so we could use it quite well. And yeah, so I'm gonna show you some showcases for the workflow. Again, I try to do this live. I hope it works out. First thing is just the modeling, or in general the pipeline of how the 3D modeling stuff worked. Also because that's like my main thing, and I can talk in most detail about it. Most of the 3D content that weren't individual assets, and where do I have it? So I'm going to show this based on the start scene with the roots, because it's simple. I use a tool called Houdini, which is a proprietary closed source commercial software, but I love it. It's one of the very few companies I give money for software because I think they do a great job. There are also some memes about this, you know, but I've been trying to learn that kind of stuff for like 15 years, and now I had a reason to, so went at it. So basically just the general principle for all the stuff that looks organic, for the trees, for all of those things, it's a full procedural workflow. Houdini is a collection of about 3 or 4 different graphical programming languages and 2 script languages and 1 programming language. And you can shuffle data around. That's basically it. So to get the roots, you would then basically start with a sphere. Let's deform it a bit. Let's deform it more, because that's just noise applied to the position. Then we can populate points inside the volume of that object, randomly connect those points based on distance. We select some points at the start with a bounding box. We select some points randomly based on distribution. And then we find the shortest path on the geometry between the starting points and the end. We resample it a bit, so we have more points and everything gets a bit smooth. And because those are lines, we can sweep them. And each of those nodes has a few parameters. That's just the ramp for the thickness of it, basically. And because it's Houdini and it's great, you also just have a button for computing the UVs for the whole thing. So that's nice. And then because you still have, not everything is super smooth, I then went on, converted it to volumes and smoothed the volumes, and then converted the volumes back to polygons, and then reduced the amount of polygons, and then transferred the UVs back to the polys from the original, which is pretty power intensive, so I'm not going to show it here on the laptop, but most of it was kind of done this way in terms of modeling than just apply material. And also, fun fact, I've mentioned beforehand that I had a bit bad experience of working with cameras in GLTF, which is why there are there are actually like two output processes. Exporting the scenes once as GLTF, and explicitly do not export the cameras. Cameras are also done in Houdini. Then I have an export for FBX, which then includes only the cameras. Then I open Blender and I import both files, because the GLTF is great for the geometry and the materials, but it will break if there are some cameras in there. FBX then works great for the cameras, but it messes up the materials. So both together work great, put them into Blender, and then I exported everything again as GLTF, and then it works. And I can import it into the tool just to show this here, for example. Let's put in a POV, and let's and that's basically the scene that we saw beforehand. We can select the different cameras that we have. It looks a bit weird because we also need to define a environment map for it. Then it looks like this, and then we have on here quite a few effects, like then a field with some cooling, and so fog, we have ambient occlusion, and then it's some additional post effects. So that's how the 3D part worked for the poly modeling. Next up, Gaussian splatting. So the two scenes, the hall, the evac, and the flowers, and some trees in between, they were done with Gaussian splatting, which is a rendering technique that's basically similar to point clouds, but instead of a fixed point, you have an ellipse with transparency and a gradient on it. So the starting point for this, for example, for the flowers, would then be something like this. So you take a lot of pictures. That's just in my living room with some lights. And always, if you do stuff like photogrammetry, you have your little markers to help the software. And the process on there was take a lot of photos. You do classic structure from motion. You generate a point cloud, and then you load that point cloud together with all your images into what I used was Nerve Studio, which was then front end for Gsplat, which had me deal with Docker containers, which do not pin like the Python dependency version stuff, and then your container breaks, and all those nice things. And basically what then Gsplat will do and train is it will look at the point cloud, look at all the images, and try to fit those ellipses to be as close to the various images that one had. For the evac call, I took some days in Saarbrücken with cameras and took 9,000 photos, I think, in total, then, which weren't all used, but also just as long as I have time to show this. What I then used, for example, for the flower, with the evac, there was really just like one scene. Again, Lost did the render for this with some toolings that you can also like break them apart. Like the effects you see, this is just individual splats being transformed. For the flowers, then it was more like, and just see, there's also for Houdini, there's a nice plugin to work with Gaussian splats. So that's basically then the point cloud or the splat file generated from the flowers. And in the scene with the butterflies over the flowers, this was just, so that's the, let me get this. Yeah, basically then one flower, and we transform it, and because the color on the here is just another thing in Houdini, I can just change the color. I also have to select it. So, and doing this multiple times with 2 flowers, or 2 flower models in different colors, and transformed and rotated and activate the rendering. Yeah, that's then thing, and let's get it ported as well into the tooling, and then same process as otherwise. And I also, what did I check on mapping for? Oh yeah, I can show this shortly just for a little giggle. That the paintings look kind of 3D-ish. If you look at Blender, that's that's how the scene looks, for example. So you take like different depth layers, layers of an image, and then you look at from the camera. It kind of looks okay-ish. You project the image on it. So, for example, that's how the texture looks. And for all the background, that's just going in there with Krita and cloning out the pixels that you don't want to see. And similarly, then, and that's the one that doesn't work, right? Here I need to. Yeah. So also for this scene, then of course some stuff it needs to look correct from the camera point of view, but of course, as soon as you change it, yeah, it's a pretty simple illusion. You can also use it like with photos and stuff. It's pretty great for visual effects stuff, because once you projected and baked the pixel date on there, you can also just then go in, and this doesn't work anyway, and also then like go in here and paint out stuff or paint in stuff. And last thing, yeah, right, that's also just a little tricky. We don't have a particle system in the engine, but we have some things like flying around. And just to show you how this was done, I think this scene needs a little bit to load. Okay. So here you can see it in all its glory. So for example, these butterflies flying around. I hope, yeah, you can see this. The way they are moving is, so this is the texture that is applied, because Shauna did like all those pixel graphics as animations, looping ones. I had a few frames to take on this. We don't have support for looping images. Cool, not yet. But that's the texture, and these are the UVs of those little strips you see here on which they are mapped. And then, no, here. If we simply move the UVs around, if your geometry corresponds kind of to the movement, things like that, and in the tool itself, we simply can specify for different materials, specify UV offset, which is much simpler to do than other forms of animation stuff. So similar thing with like the blinking lights here, just to show you. That's the texture, and that's the UVs. So you do this, you move the UVs over there, you get something changing colors. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to leave this because I'm pretty much out of time. I think it's also hard for questions, but yeah, if you want to know more about something or anyway, there's Signal, there's Fedi. You can write me at hey, I saw your talk at gpn@psykon.net. And yeah, with that, I think we have a few minutes for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I don't know. Otherwise, I'm around here. Hit me up. Write me. I hope you got something out of this talk, and yeah, that it was either enlightening or entertaining. One of those. Yeah.
So, all right, maybe 2 questions. There's one right there.
Hello. I love your work. I also watched your special effects in Godzilla movies talk 2 years ago in Revision.
Thanks.
So my question is, are you going to release this on GitHub?
Yeah, I was prepared for that one. Not yet, or let's say we don't have any specific plans for it. As it is with like demos tools specifically, everything that gets done on there is done for some specific production thing, which makes it usually very hard to use as a general tool. Now, a few more people have started working on this, and if it turns out that it gets into kind of a general usable tool, I think this will be, of course, discussed internally if we would open it. But nothing I can promise at the point.
So, one other question? Anyone? Dann machst du noch mal.
So, psykon, did I understand that correctly at the beginning, that the party where this was then shown, where you had to crunch, you were the main organizer of tech, and so doing all basically the VOC work at that party, and while you finished up a demo, is that correct?
Yeah.
And should we use that time to give a big round of applause to everyone sitting on mixers and stream and audio video stuff out there?
Please do, and please do not follow my example.
Yes, big round of applause to everyone right there.
So, yeah, I guess Shana already ended the talk with that. No more applause. Or maybe 1 round? Okay.